As dust settled over medieval settlements, individuals accustomed to working in the shadows emerged. They undertook tasks no one desired but on which society depended entirely. The gong farmer, submerged up to his ankles in human waste, labored through the night's accumulated filth. Tanners endured potent fumes and harsh chemicals to provide the community with necessary leather goods. Plague doctors, their eerie beaked masks a chilling sight, moved among the ill like harbingers of doom. Within the dungeon, executioners performed decapitations, while miners, often forgotten underground, faced the constant risk of being buried alive by rockfall. Whether gathering leeches or combating rodent infestations, these figures of history confronted death regularly, leaving behind narratives marked by grime and fortitude. It was a world where life began in the complex space between hope and dread, woven from the threads of blood and devotion. The medieval period regarded birth not merely as a biological event, but as a profound moment imbued with both mystery and peril. Women undergoing labor approached this ordeal with a mix of reverence and apprehension, recognizing the occasion as one holding the potential for new life alongside the ever-present threat of death. The absence of modern medical knowledge transformed the birthing area, often a common corner of the family dwelling, into a hushed, sacred space. Here, the sounds of labor combined with quiet murmurs of prayer, while the air filled with the scent of burning herbs and incense, intended to ward off malevolent spirits believed ready to claim the newborn soul. In this intimate setting, the village midwife stood as both guide and protector, a figure embodying knowledge and a touch of mystery. He was frequently the wisest, yet most often uncelebrated person in his community, navigating the perilous boundary between existence and its end. Lacking scientific tools, he relied on a blend of practical skill and superstitious belief, employing charms, holy relics, and a keen understanding of what was considered arcane knowledge. His collection of tools containing saints' relics, amulets marked with cryptic symbols, and herbs valued for their mystical properties proved essential in his work. Each birth represented a journey fraught with danger, where an unforeseen complication could quickly shift the scene from a cradle's promise to the edge of a graveside. The midwife's role was viewed through a lens of sacred duty, though occasionally tinged with suspicion. As custodians of the crucial passage between life and death, midwives occupied a liminal space where the church observed their practices cautiously, sometimes perceiving hints of heresy. Despite these concerns, midwives were indispensable within their communities. They were respected for their extensive knowledge, passed down as a sacred trust akin to an ancient guild's legacy. Their techniques blended practical understanding with mystical convictions, using chants and prayers alongside physical treatments like poultices and herbal mixtures. In his effort to safely guide both mother and child through childbirth, a midwife might invoke saints associated with birth, such as Saint Margaret or Saint Bridge. This appeal for divine intervention was more than a mere formality. It represented a deeply held belief that celestial aid could tip the balance toward a favorable outcome. Yet the line between legitimate faith and perceived witchcraft was dangerously narrow for midwives who navigated a precarious path where their reputations could depend on the unpredictable hand of fate. Nevertheless, most regarded him with respect, seeing in his hands the potential for miracles, manifesting in the simplest of surroundings. The initial breaths of a medieval child were overshadowed by the presence of death, a persistent specter that haunted every delivery. High infant mortality rates meant that no family, regardless of wealth or standing, was immune to its cold embrace. The harsh reality that many mothers might lose their infants within days or weeks cast a somber pall over the birthing experience. Communities devised rituals not only to welcome a child into the world, but also to prepare him spiritually for death's likely approach. In an effort to counteract the grim odds, baptism was performed with remarkable haste, sometimes within mere hours following birth. This ritual underscored water's dual significance, both life-giving and purifying, seen as crucial for cleansing and protecting the infant's soul. The urgency highlighted spiritual concerns while pragmatically acknowledging the harsh realities of existence and mortality. The fragility of life necessitated an early claim to divine protection, with the church's blessing intricately interwoven with parents' hopes for their child's survival. Baptism thus became not just a marker of spiritual inclusion, but a sober acknowledgement of life's inherent unpredictability. Swaddling, a custom seeing some modern revival, was a medieval practice deeply rooted in both purpose and meaning. Newborns were tightly bound in strips of fabric, symbolizing a desire for a contained, secure existence, shielded from the chaos and uncertainty marking the external world. On a practical level, swaddling provided support for a baby's delicate limbs. It was believed to promote proper growth and prevent deformities, which were often attributed to malevolent forces. Beyond physical well-being, swaddling held spiritual and moral implications. Swaddling bands, frequently made with blessed threads or inscribed with prayers, wrapped newborns not just in fabric, but in a mantle of divine protection and parental aspirations. Such practices reflected a core aspect of the medieval mindset. Every physical action carried spiritual resonance. Through swaddling, parents hoped to align their child's life with moral and physical harmony, guiding him toward a future free from physical and spiritual turmoil. Thus, in a world where life was both a precious gift and a precarious undertaking, childbirth in the Middle Ages was imbued with profound cultural and spiritual significance. It was a ritualistic passage surrounded by mystery, a sense of duty, and a deep-seated desire to forge a future despite the ever-present shadow of mortality. In medieval towns and villages, the absence of modern drainage and paved surfaces meant that streets frequently turned into thick mud, especially in the rain-soaked climates common in Northern Europe. A man might picture himself navigating these pathways, where every step caused his feet to sink deeper into sticky mud that clung stubbornly to hems and boot soles alike. These routes, built from compacted earth and worn by the relentless passage of feet, hooves, and cartwheels, transformed into impassable quagmires during the wetter seasons. Mud was more than just an annoyance. It was a constant companion in daily life, trapping both travelers and their spirits. Yet amidst this grimy backdrop, life continued vibrantly. Markets bustled, fairs brought moments of joy, and the flow of news traveled along these muddy thoroughfares. Townspeople responded to the challenge with practical solutions, constructing raised walkways in crucial areas or spreading straw to absorb moisture. The simple act of traversing these streets became a small victory in lives already defined by continuous hardship. Mud was not merely an impediment. It was a testament to the ingenuity embodied in the sure-footed steps of merchants and farmers who battled the elements as they went about their business. Within homes, the narrative of filth persisted. Chamber pots were commonplace given the widespread lack of sanitation systems. Heads would lean out of windows to empty the previous night's contents into the streets below, mixing personal waste with that of countless others. This unceremonious disposal might be shocking today, but it reflected a stark necessity, revealing an intimate acceptance of life's unavoidable realities. Streets served a dual purpose as communal sewers, a function born out of necessity rather than ignorance. In an era unaware of bacterial infections, lice were ever-present companions, thriving unseen within clothing that was seldom washed. Rooms echoed with the sound of scratching, a reflection of lives lived in close proximity where sharing was inevitable, and lice spread easily. These small parasites were simply a fact of existence, not a mark of shame, and dealing with their persistent presence became a familiar chore. Although irritating, lice symbolized the medieval person's larger struggle against pestilence, always on the verge of the next devastating plague. The Black Death tragically demonstrated the destructive power these persistent pests could wield. Yet they also influenced cultural practices surrounding personal cleanliness and even social distinctions. The smell of medieval life was as inescapable as its mud. The air, heavy with smoke from numerous hearths, mixed with the sharp tang of tanning leather and the acrid notes of dung-fueled fires. Market stalls offered a blend of fresh and decaying produce, creating a sensory assault of both pleasant and foul odors. Concepts of hygiene were vastly different from ours. Outward appearance held greater importance than sanitation, with clean outer garments and tidy hair valued more than internal cleanliness. Bathing was a rare luxury, more accessible to the wealthy, while common folk generally limited themselves to rinsing their faces and washing their hands. Excessive washing was even viewed with apprehension, seen as potentially inviting illness, a confusion born from blending religious beliefs with limited medical understanding. Water, while essential for cleanliness, played a different role. It was often scarce and contaminated. Its availability meant lengthy waits at communal wells and risky consumption from rivers that carried both life and waste. Although some cities developed basic aqueducts, access to clean water was never guaranteed. People adapted to these challenges, conserving water out of necessity rather than concern for purity. Bathing customs, though infrequent, sometimes became social events. Public baths provided spaces for relaxation and socializing, although they were often scrutinized for perceived immorality. The wealthy might enjoy private baths, while commoners experienced rougher, more basic versions. Regional practices were influenced by spiritual and medical beliefs, helping to maintain some culture of bathing despite widespread reluctance. Fire played a critical role in medieval life, a vital source of warmth that left homes and their inhabitants alike stained with soot. Smoke naturally vented through roofs, but settled on interiors and people, a residue of survival marking their skin and lungs. Despite its inconvenience, this smoky environment was inextricably linked to daily life, fostering a resilient community of survivors within its pervasive shadow. Amidst this acceptance of pervasive filth, medieval innovations gradually emerged. Basic sewers and paved streets appeared, offering improved sanitation for those living in cities. Monasteries, often seen as bastions of cleanliness, set an example with strict bathing routines and early sanitation systems. Such incremental advancements highlighted the medieval drive to improve their environment despite limited technological understanding, planting the seeds for future improvements in public health. Born from the mud and hardship, these signs of change help shape a world intimately connected to our own, reminding us of an enduring human spirit that thrived both within and in spite of the surrounding filth. In the intricate tapestry of medieval existence, food served as both a basic necessity and a powerful reflection of societal divisions. For the peasant man, each meal spoke of survival, a steady rhythm of agricultural labor woven into every bite. His diet, simple and functional, revolved around pottage, a basic stew that simmered with whatever vegetables the land provided, with onions and barley being staples. On fortunate occasions, a bone might find its way into the pot, its marrow a rare prized treat. The bread he consumed was dense and rough, a testament to rye and barley ground using rudimentary mills. Survival, not pleasure, defined every flavor and texture. The arduous journey from seed to table mirrored the relentless cycles of work dictated by nature. Fields demanded constant attention, and each hard-won morsel was produced by calloused hands and aching backs. Cooking was a time-consuming process over smoky hearths, primarily the responsibility of peasant women. The looming specter of famine was ever present, with crop failures forcing families to scavenge for roots or wild herbs. Meals were inherently communal, binding families together and serving as a time for sharing both sustenance and hardship. Eating was a solemn affair, a necessary ritual of existence maintained amidst scarcity. In stark contrast, the tables of the nobility groaned under displays of wealth, laden with spreads that signified status. For them, dining went beyond mere necessity, becoming a potent demonstration of their wealth and influence. Exquisitely prepared meats, swan, peacock, venison, graced platters, enveloped in rich sauces flavored with spices imported from distant lands. Sugar-sweetened pastries and candied fruits crowned the extravagance. Food itself became a form of theater, with dishes often shaped to delight or impress by mimicking castles or mythical creatures. To a modern man's eyes, medieval table manners might appear as foreign as the food itself. Forks were viewed with suspicion, considered peculiar novelties. Hands made eating an intimate experience, a tactile connection with the food. Feasts were highly social occasions, with alliances forged amidst the lively atmosphere of numerous courses that extended late into the evening. Yet even the lavish spread held hidden dangers. Without refrigeration, spoilage was a constant threat, its unpleasant odors often masked by pungent spices. Nevertheless, these feasts filled halls with life, orchestrating a complex harmony across social ranks, uniting nobles in a shared indulgence that the peasantry could barely imagine. Bread, a common thread across all social classes, nonetheless highlighted significant divisions. For the peasant, it was dark and heavy, the grains frequently mixed with weeds or ergot. This, often paired with ale, offered little comfort but provided essential sustenance. Contrast this with the refined man-shaped bread of the nobles. Light and white, emblematic of high status. Bread even served as a makeshift plate. Trenchers absorbed rich flavors before being consumed or given away. This use of bread reflected both culinary resourcefulness and stark class distinctions. The strong aroma of spices added another layer of differentiation. They were indicators of wealth and sophistication, their exotic origins hinting at worlds far beyond medieval understanding. Nobles used cinnamon, cloves, and pepper generously in their dishes, not only for flavor, but also to disguise spoilage and maintain an appealing appearance. For the peasantry, spices were distant legends. Local herbs played more practical roles, primarily in preservation. Salting, smoking, and drying meats were long-standing traditions that provided security against harsh winters and unpredictable harvests. These methods imparted their own distinct flavors, born out of necessity rather than a desire for culinary adventure. Yet the resulting taste told a story of survival and resilience, even as they underscored the social gaps in access to culinary luxuries. Drinks provided both comfort and hydration. Ale was pervasive among the peasantry, often brewed by women known as brewsters. Its low alcohol content made it a healthier staple than potentially contaminated water, removing waterborne threats. Mead offered a sweeter option, often reserved for celebrations. Nobles, however, favored wine, a clear symbol of status that flowed from regions rich in vineyards. Hippocras, a spiced wine blend, was a common feature at noble feasts, showcasing the craft and chemistry involved in its creation. Drinks thus served as societal symbols, highlighting the interplay of class, climate, and necessity. Religion also significantly influenced culinary customs, setting boundaries between periods of feasting and fasting. Church directives transformed dining practices, intricately linking spiritual and physical nourishment. Major feasts followed church holidays, signaling abundance in a time when famine often loomed. Conversely, fasting periods restricted indulgence, creating a temporary leveling of disparities through shared abstinence. The periods of Advent and Lent brought about significant changes in eating patterns, as reliance on simpler foods became universal. This practice transcended class distinctions in the face of shared doctrinal observance. Medieval dining rituals were deeply embedded in ceremony. For nobles, banquets were staged theatrical displays, complete with entertainers like jugglers and musicians, and elaborate service protocols. Food became a language of status, its elaborate presentation reinforcing bonds within the rigid social hierarchy. Peasant mealtime rituals, though less extravagant, were no less significant. They emphasized community through meals often bookended by prayer and customary practices. Food practices seamlessly merged sustenance with belief, imbuing daily life with meaning that went beyond mere survival. The medieval landscape itself directly influenced what was eaten. Peasants ate what the land provided, with root vegetables forming the foundation of their diet. Coastal communities enjoyed fish, while inland diets reflected regional strengths, ranging from game to various grains. For nobles, wider access meant a palate of plenty, an edible map of Europe's diverse offerings. Yet the sacredness of food permeated all classes, upheld by superstitious safeguards involving herbs and relics. Even the process of decay found a certain acceptance under the protective influence of faith, illustrating the medieval intertwining of life's inherent dangers with its precious, often unruly bounty. In a subtle irony, hunger and abundance coexisted, a reality often hidden beneath a facade of perseverance. Each meal served as a silent testament to enduring through the vast medieval night. In the medieval world, the concept of childhood as a distinct, prolonged phase was fragile at best. From the moment a boy could walk, he was expected to become a valuable contributor to his household. The idea of long, carefree summers was simply a fantasy. Instead, life quickly propelled him into demanding labor. A boy as young as 6 might find himself tending sheep, learning to withstand the biting wind and the sting of rain with little more than his innate patience and fortitude. Meanwhile, a girl of similar age would likely be immersed in domestic tasks, spinning wool, assisting with brewing ale, and helping in the kitchen, each task vital to her family's subsistence. While young hands were kept busy, their minds absorbed stern lessons in religion and the formidable concept of divine punishment. Stories depicting the torments of hellfire became common educational tools, instilling a morality dictated by the severe, watchful gaze of a demanding God. These narratives were intended to guide children's behavior, embedding a fear of heavenly retribution that overshadowed any simple childhood innocence. As the years passed, this persistent shadow of divine judgment became a haunting presence, a more permanent guide than any fleeting moments of play. Discipline in medieval society was as predictable as the sunrise. It was administered readily, often with rods or sometimes harsher instruments. The belief was that such measures could expel the devil from within a child. Parents wielded these disciplinary tools under the conviction that it was the truest expression of love, a way to teach obedience and respect for authority. From a very young age, children learned that their actions had tangible, frequently painful consequences. This harsh reality instilled submission as a virtue, a fundamental principle that echoed throughout every level of medieval life, ensuring conformity within its rigidly hierarchical structure. For those fortunate enough to gain access to schooling, education was characterized by strict discipline and extensive rote memorization. Although often a privilege reserved for boys of slightly higher social standing or those destined for the church, education could open doors to different opportunities. In austere classrooms, young minds wrestled with Latin grammar and religious texts, drilled repeatedly under the implied threat of a ruler's sting on their knuckles. Yet formal schooling, like other aspects of medieval childhood, often had to yield quickly to family needs, sending children back into the workforce. The rigorous nature of education, though often brief, left a lasting impact, teaching both obedience to authority and a respect for the structured order of the world. Moments of play were scarce, emerging only on the fringes of work and learning. Children carved out brief respites in their demanding schedules for games that mirrored adult responsibilities. The toys available were simple and often homemade: cloth dolls, wooden figures, and basic balls. Each item reflected the resourcefulness necessitated by scarcity. Play was, above all, a glimpse into the roles they would soon inhabit, their imaginations serving as a rehearsal for the burdens of adulthood. For those born into nobility, playtime occasionally allowed for greater luxuries such as chess, falconry, or learning to sing. Yet even for them, these activities echoed a future defined by duty. Games of chivalry using wooden swords foreshadowed the diplomatic and combative skills required later in life. In time, the divergence between noble and peasant play reflected their societal roles, both wrapped in lessons of leadership, service, and survival within their respective spheres. Amidst constant labor, medieval children developed a resilience that often surprised both their contemporaries and modern historians. Navigating a world fraught with natural challenges, they quickly honed practical survival skills, understanding weather patterns, managing livestock, and confronting the numerous setbacks inherent in medieval life. These children became examples of ingenuity from an early age. In times of famine or disaster, their contributions frequently meant the difference between survival and ruin for their families. A child's social acuity developed alongside his physical robustness. He learned the rigid hierarchies of his world, sharpening his observational skills to navigate its complex social landscape. Children often served as quiet observers for their families, gathering knowledge on discrete behavior essential for their future roles. Through subtle negotiations with market vendors or tactful exchanges with feudal lords, medieval children refined a form of diplomatic finesse, a skill set crucial for navigating the complexities of adulthood. For many girls, marriage marked an abrupt end to childhood, sometimes occurring shortly after the onset of puberty. Strategic unions were arranged, occasionally years before the couple even met, serving to seal alliances or enhance familial status. These marriages thrust girls into the core of adult responsibilities, with household management and childbearing becoming central focuses. Boys, conversely, transitioned into adulthood through apprenticeships or by becoming squires, entering trades that would define their futures. These apprenticeships demanded arduous work and unwavering dedication, shaping their skills and fostering resilience, marking the significant shift from childhood into the adult world. Despite limited medical knowledge, harsh living conditions, and poor sanitation. Infant mortality rates were tragically high, with only about half of all children surviving into adolescence. Parents lived with the grim expectation of loss. Grief was both a personal burden and a publicly acknowledged reality. Communal support helped mitigate these blows, allowing families to share in collective mourning. Yet each child's brief life, marked by a simple burial and poignant remembrance, underscored the community's recognition of life's transience and the delicate dance between youth and maturity. This harsh reality offered children little solace beyond the promise of religion. From the moment of baptism onwards, children were enveloped in a religious framework that structured their entire world. Saints became living legends, and biblical stories etched paradigms of virtue and vice into their young minds. Religious rituals provided a sense of stability amidst life's unpredictability, offering consistency in the often capricious medieval existence. While doctrine could feel burdensome, children developed personal connections with their faith through shared stories and worship in their own language. Festivals offered rare moments of lightness in this demanding existence, allowing brief glimpses of joy. These events integrated children into communal traditions, celebrating their transitions from childhood into the adult community. Yet any indulgence was tempered by reminders of faith and responsibility, a cyclical pattern of renewal and reinforcement, affirming the continuity of medieval life and endowing medieval childhood with a powerful legacy that resonates through the ages. In the faint glow of flickering candles, the barber surgeon's chair stood as a stark symbol of the raw human endurance characteristic of medieval life, where the act of cutting hair often transitioned abruptly into cutting flesh. These versatile practitioners, equipped with nothing more than basic tools like slender blades and unsharpened scissors, handled both dentistry and surgery in a world completely unaware of anesthesia or the concept of germs. A man might imagine these individuals working quickly, the sound of metal instruments clanking, mixing with murmured prayers for survival. Each procedure was a struggle against the odds, as veins bled freely and teeth were extracted without any relief from pain, turning a simple ache into a torturous ordeal. Amidst the lingering scent of sweat and blood, the barber surgeon's proximity meant more than just physical suffering. It was a grim interplay where each backward bend of a knee or anguished clench of teeth told stories passed down during hushed apprentice gatherings under flickering light. Surgical procedures took place not in sterile environments, but amidst the chaos of daily life, with stained aprons and the raw sounds of iron meeting bone. Even the successes highlighted human fragility, emphasizing a spirit resilient in its ongoing battle against the ever-present shadow of death. In a society accustomed to the constant sound of hammers striking anvils and the demands of the fields, injuries were frequent companions. Teeth, often succumbing to decay, brought forth an agony that no amount of chanting or herbal remedies could fully alleviate. A toothache could turn sinister, evoking not just personal torment, but a shared dread of pure, unmasked suffering. Without modern comforts, people faced the elements exposed, forced to depend on improvised cures. The herbs and folk remedies of the time, wrapped in layers of superstition, did little more than mask the deeper pain that permeated the veneer of society. Across landscapes shaped by relentless labor, wounds of all kinds coexisted with the calloused hands that worked the forge and harvested the crops. Each cut and bruise was another detail added to the communal narrative, a reminder of life's unpredictable force. Legs would give way under heavy burdens, and arms bore the scars of an existence where even moments of leisure were tinged with the demands of labor. In a time when safety regulations were non-existent, injuries carried consequences far beyond the physical. Survival often depended on the body's capacity for healing, a testament to the resilience forged in the fields and workshops. Against this backdrop flowed the strange practice of using leeches and bloodletting, methods deeply rooted in the belief that health resided in balancing the body's humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. It was a procedure both feared and respected, performed by skilled hands with a conviction drawn from ancient texts. Ironically, these acts of faith sometimes hastened death, drawing individuals closer to the very end they hoped to avoid. Nevertheless, they illustrate a period that strove to impose order on the chaotic ebb and flow of life through practices steeped in mystery and an intuitive grasp of underlying rhythms. In this context, infection presented a curious paradox, where pus was both strangely celebrated and feared. Considered both a troubling sight and a promising sign of recovery, the medieval understanding of infection suggested a level of familiarity with the body's processes that went beyond mere empathy. In the literature of the time, metaphors flourished around themes of decay and renewal, painting a vivid contrast of fear and fascination, where even the body's most unpleasant aspects held a peculiar allure, circling back to the theme of resilience. Within homes filled with whispered prayers and clinking amulets, medieval people wove safety nets using herbs and charms, blending natural remedies with the supernatural. Chamomile and sage were used alongside incantations and handcrafted protective objects, reflecting a belief system where the physical and mystical intertwined seamlessly. Community healers, custodians of traditional knowledge, chanted over concoctions, harmonizing earthly and otherworldly realms, solidifying the connection between nature's restorative power and the daunting challenges of human suffering. Faith, a powerful ally, was intricately linked with healing, assigning each ailment a role within a divine narrative. Monasteries served as refuges, combining prayer with treatment, encouraging healing through spiritual intervention. Pilgrims sought comfort and salvation, believing that their hardships were part of a larger divine plan. Saints acted as vital intermediaries with the divine, holy figures believed to be closer to God and thus trusted to intercede on behalf of the faithful. Their veneration added a personal dimension to devotion, with each saint representing specific virtues or serving as patrons of particular causes and trades. Relics, physical objects associated with saints, became central to invoking their power. Enshrined in elaborate reliquaries, these objects attracted pilgrims from great distances, transforming towns into bustling centers of both spiritual and economic activity. The mind, as vulnerable as the body, was often seen through a spiritual lens. Its disorders were sometimes interpreted as both divine punishment and supernatural interference. Episodes of madness could prompt appeals to prayer, suspicion, and sometimes condemnation, reflecting a community caught between compassion and fear. Stories preserved in historical records hint at a world where psychological distress elicited responses ranging from isolation to support within the community or solitary confinement, a dichotomy often shrouded in mysticism. Engagement with the raw realities of life shaped an existence where survival depended on navigating a world defined by resilience and sheer determination. The rough touch of the earth and the jarring difficulty of travel were more than just physical trials. They were imbued with meaning, woven into the stories told in manuscripts and songs. Beneath fingernails lined with grime and palms hardened by labor, lay the echoes of a saga, a testament to an era's enduring fortitude, against which everything, even hope, held a certain bittersweet quality. Amidst the struggles, however, hope did flourish, a thread running through the fabric of medieval life, assuring those who dared to look beyond immediate hardship that beyond every trial lay the potential for triumph and resilience. In the medieval world, faith was far more than a personal conviction. It was the very atmosphere people breathed. Every moment of life was marked by a sense of the divine presence. Church bells pealed, calling the faithful to prayer and reminding them of their place within the cosmic order. These bells were not simply signals for services. They were perceived as celestial notes imposing harmony on a world constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. Regardless of his social standing, from the humblest peasant to the most powerful lord, faith demanded observance and reverence, binding society together with its sacred thread. Religious rituals and ceremonies permeated the rhythm of daily existence. Each day presented an opportunity to acknowledge God's presence, as actions from waking to eating were intertwined with devotion. The church served as a cornerstone of life, spiritually, socially, and administratively. With a calendar marked by feast days and celebrations honoring saints, life unfolded against a backdrop of communal gatherings. Faith was not merely a solitary journey, it was a shared experience, as essential as it was unavoidable. Medieval minds were captivated by vivid images of heaven and hell, realms considered as real as the earth they worked, and the sky they looked to for signs. Heaven represented eternal peace, a reward for the devout. In contrast, The fiery depths of hell were a constant threat, often used by the church to keep congregations in line. Striking depictions in sermons and artworks made these places feel palpably near. Such imagery guided moral choices and influenced everyday actions, keeping the focus steadily on the prospect of divine judgment. Clergy wielded the promise of heaven and the threat of hell effectively, emphasizing the dangers of sin and the path of virtue required to avoid damnation. Paintings and sermons focused on damnation ensured that even seemingly mundane actions held eternal significance. This belief system encouraged practices like confession and penance, reinforcing both ecclesiastical authority and the perceived necessity of spiritual purification. Medieval folk lived in a world where the spiritual stakes felt as real as those involving flesh and bone. Saints served as vital intermediaries with the divine, holy figures believed to be closer to God and thus trusted to intercede on behalf of the faithful. Their veneration added a personal dimension to devotion, with each saint representing specific virtues or acting as patrons for particular causes and trades. Relics, physical remnants associated with saints, became central to invoking their power. Housed in ornate reliquaries, these objects attracted pilgrims from vast distances, transforming towns into bustling centers of both spiritual pilgrimage and economic activity. To the medieval mind, relics were understood to possess tangible divine power, capable of producing miracles and offering protection. When miracles did occur, they were accepted not with doubt, but as clear signs of God's favor. During times of severe crisis, such as outbreaks of plague or famine, hope often rested squarely on these miraculous events. While medieval medical knowledge was undoubtedly limited, the promise of divine intervention provided both reassurance and a sense of purpose. Miracles served as undeniable proof of a supernatural presence in the world, bridging the often vast chasm between human suffering and divine grace. The church exerted far greater dominance over daily life than any modern institution, serving as the central hub for both education and governance. Monasteries and convents were instrumental in preserving and disseminating knowledge across a wide range of subjects, from theological studies to basic scientific principles. Clergy members were recognized community leaders, integrating spiritual, educational, and civic responsibilities into their everyday interactions. Their influence reached into virtually every aspect of life, from resolving marriage disputes in church courts to presiding over the celebrations that marked the changing seasons. This pervasive presence shaped laws, cultural norms, and social hierarchies alike. Medieval churches were more than just places of worship. They were imposing symbols of God's authority on earth. These architectural marvels, with their towering facades and elaborate stained glass, communicated biblical stories through a visual language accessible to everyone. The artistic works within these spaces transformed worship into a deeply sensory experience, with the sounds of choral music and the light filtering through colorful windows guiding the soul towards the divine. Beyond the formal rituals of the church, medieval life was deeply infused with superstition. Charms, amulets, and specific gestures coexisted comfortably alongside Christian doctrine, reflecting a synthesis of older pagan beliefs and Christian practices. These customary rituals formed a rich body of folklore, offering both comfort and structure in a world that felt inherently unpredictable, where the mystical and the divine were profoundly interconnected. Tithing, a tax mandated by the church, constituted a significant element of religious life, requiring a portion of one's income or produce. Despite the burden this placed on many, failure to pay tithes resulted in severe consequences within the community. Pilgrimages, another crucial aspect of faith, represented not only individual devotion, but also a shared expression of religious commitment. These journeys, whether to local shrines or distant holy lands, demonstrated a collective spiritual fervor that helped unify the medieval world. Clerical figures served as the community's spiritual guides and administrators, effectively bridging the earthly realm and the divine. Literacy afforded the clergy a high status, enabling them to wield influence across all societal spheres. Some members of the clergy genuinely exemplified virtuous living, while others exploited their power. Nevertheless, their roles were essential. They oversaw life's most critical rites and provided comfort amid suffering, anchoring society within a complex framework of faith and tradition. Religion offered a paradoxical existence. It imposed restrictions through strict doctrines, yet simultaneously offered liberation through the promise of salvation. The fear of hell and excommunication acted as potent regulators of behavior. Yet at the same time, faith offered refuge in the hope of eternal reward. This duality, both constraining and freeing in equal measure, revealed the profound complexities inherent in the medieval man's search for meaning and order amidst the uncertainties of life. In the dimly lit chronicles of the Middle Ages, justice presented a grim countenance. It was a time when the fragile surface of civilization was supported by a legal system driven as much by the installation of fear as by the pursuit of fairness. The world then was a volatile place, constantly poised on the edge of chaos, and law and order were maintained through a range of punishments that were as brutal as they were publicly displayed. Breaking the law was considered more than just an offense against one's neighbors. It was viewed as an affront to the divine order itself, a sacrilegious act demanding rectification not only in this life, but in the afterlife. This theatrical display of justice unfolded in town squares, which effectively served as stages for a harsh form of social drama. When a man was sentenced, the entire community witnessed it, reinforcing social norms through these chilling spectacles. The gallows did not merely execute the guilty, they etched a vivid and lasting reminder into the community's collective memory. The stocks and pillories transformed punishment into a public event, a stark warning that defiance came with a heavy price. Medieval trials were steeped in unusual customs. Trials by ordeal, rituals that pitted the accused against the elements or tested their physical endurance were common practice. The belief was that God would reveal the man's innocence or guilt. Imagine being forced to carry a heated iron a certain distance or being submerged in icy water. If the burns healed cleanly or if the man sank and did not float to the surface, divine intervention was believed to have confirmed his innocence. In a world where God's will was thought to be as tangible as the ground beneath one's feet, such methods seemed entirely logical. Theft carried its own unforgiving consequences. Stealing something as simple as a loaf of bread could result in the loss of a hand. This severe retaliation was not solely about the crime itself. It was about preserving a precarious balance in a society where every grain, every resource was critical. In close-knit communities, theft was considered a betrayal of trust so serious that it threatened the very foundation of survival. Losing a hand was a public, unmistakable warning to others, a stark reminder of the fragile social and economic realities that held everyone together. Blasphemy, on the other hand, was seen as a sin that attacked the very core of moral and religious belief. With the church holding immense authority over the eternal fate of the soul, any disrespect towards its sacred doctrines was deemed intolerable. The stocks were a common punishment for such transgressions, subjecting blasphemers to long periods of exposure and public humiliation. This was the kind of punishment that left a deep mark, not primarily due to physical pain, but because of the profound social ostracism it caused. The community's active participation in shaming these individuals highlighted their role as both judge and jury, collectively enforcing unwavering loyalty to faith and the established moral order. Medieval jails were less about rehabilitation and more about simply surviving in harsh conditions. Often, they were little more than holding cells filled with the pervasive stench of filth and neglect. Disease spread unchecked, and facilities barely met basic human needs. The darkness of these dungeons, both literally and figuratively, reflected the unforgiving nature of justice during this era. The ultimate display of justice, or perhaps injustice, was the public execution, a veritable spectacle designed to instill fear. In the town square, a man's life could be abruptly ended before an audience that was both repelled and fascinated. Clergymen would often offer blessings over the event, and the executioner, with his tools of death gleaming ominously, became the central figure in a macabre ritual. Branding and mutilation were common fates for repeat offenders, or those whose actions severely tested the patience of their neighbors. These brutal penalties left permanent, visible scars, marking individuals as perpetual criminals. Their lives from that point on were defined by those marks, no matter where they went. This practice was a lasting way to ensure that the stigma of a man's transgressions followed him, serving as a constant warning to all about the cost of moral and legal failure. Laws varied significantly from region to region, often reflecting local customs and values more than universal principles of fairness. Although many regions relied on brute force and deeply ingrained religious beliefs, this application of justice was not uniform. Powerful lords and town councils frequently manipulated the legal system to serve their own interests. It was a world where justice was often applied with a heavy hand of personal agenda, where the law served the powerful perhaps more than it served the principle of equity. For the nobility, conflicts often resulted in consequences that were different, but no less severe. Instead of immediate physical punishment, disputes among nobles could escalate into political feuds or even small-scale military confrontations, with armies effectively weighing in on the outcome of a judgment. This created a clear disparity where the face of justice changed depending on one's social standing. For the peasant man, judgment was typically swift and harsh. For the lord, it balanced precariously on negotiation, influence, and the implicit threat of armed conflict. In this public theater of medieval life, guilt was never a private matter. The punishment and the rituals surrounding it were deeply embedded in the cultural consciousness. It fostered a communal bond, a shared understanding woven into the daily rhythm of life. Justice, or its medieval interpretation, was as omnipresent and unavoidable as the church bell tolling the hours. A stern reminder hanging like a thundercloud over everyone's heads, constantly asserting order through fear, public spectacle, and perhaps a quiet sense of resignation. In the medieval world, a man's identity was intrinsically linked to his profession. From the peasant working the fields under the expansive sky to the blacksmith shaping iron with his hammer, his occupation defined his standing, his daily routine, and his place within the intricate structure of community life. Jobs were not simply chosen, they were often inherited, with sons following in their father's footsteps and daughters learning from their mothers, forming a rich tapestry where every role, no matter how humble, provided essential threads for survival. Imagine a place where work was not a part-time commitment, but a lifelong dedication, each task imbued with a clear purpose. Every occupation demanded its own specific skills, shaping both hands and lives. Within this world, a dairymaid would rise with the sun, her existence interwoven with the cycles of milk and cheese production. Meanwhile, the stonemason, his hands weathered and toughened by labor, gave form to the soaring churches that punctuated the medieval landscape. Even the seemingly insignificant rat catcher served a crucial function, protecting valuable grain stores from destructive pests. Status and respect were earned in this demanding world, where a master craftsman, recognized by his guild membership, held authority and commanded both respect and compensation. Yet beneath this structured order, the relentless demands of feudal obligations persisted, driving progress while simultaneously claiming sweat and dedication. Guilds stood as powerful entities in this landscape, exercising considerable influence over the lives of artisans, much like ancient trade unions. They set standards, protected their crafts from external competition, and provided a framework for training. For many craftsmen, the guild represented more than just economic benefit. It was a protective fraternity offering security and a sense of belonging. However, advancing within the guild required patience and demonstrable skill, culminating in the creation of a masterpiece, a tangible testament to one's mastery and perseverance. Such rigorous requirements ensured the high quality of goods that contributed significantly to local economies, like meticulously crafted ironwork and textiles produced to perfection. But guilds were not solely economic forces. They played a vital role in the cultural and political fabric of their towns. Their members were often involved in town governance and community life. Captivating ceremonies honored patron saints, and their festivals seamlessly blended sacred and secular aspects of daily existence. This influence, however, was not without its drawbacks, as guilds could also function as gatekeepers, limiting opportunities for outsiders and suppressing dissent with a firm hand. In towns where commerce was dominant, guilds were the key power brokers, their decisions shaping much of the social order and urban life. For the majority of men, however, life under the feudal system meant confronting its own harsh realities, where labor extended beyond personal survival to support the fortunes of lords and masters. The large population of peasants, essential yet often marginalized, worked tirelessly on lands they neither owned nor held claim to, frequently serving as tenants under noble or ecclesiastical authority. Tied to the rhythms of planting, tending, and harvesting, these men and women toiled endlessly through cycles that dictated their meager existence. With survival hanging precariously in balance with nature's unpredictable whims, life held paradoxes, including small pockets of free villages where peasants carved out greater autonomy, their successes celebrated in festivals that sometimes blurred social lines and fostered a sense of community unity. Yet such instances were rare gems in a backdrop where most labored relentlessly, their daily lives bound to the shadow of their master's domain. The demands of their work were clearly etched upon weathered skin and weary souls, each scar a testament to survival's harsh requirements. Women and children, though crucial to this medieval mosaic, often found their efforts less publicly acknowledged. Women juggled a multitude of roles, from tending livestock and gardens to brewing ale and managing households, essentially serving as stewards of vital domestic and agricultural endeavors. Their contributions were sometimes rendered invisible by prevailing social norms. Children, too, were integrated into the labor force early, their innocence supplanted by necessity, their small hands woven into the fabric of sustenance and expectation. In a world where survival placed a heavy burden on everyone, their young shoulders bore loads both physical and symbolic, forcing them to mature beyond their tender years. Apprenticeships formed the essential framework of craftsmanship, a rite of passage that guided young men from raw novices to skilled masters. Starting at a young age, they worked closely under their master's supervision, absorbing the techniques, tricks, ethical codes, and subtle nuances of their chosen trade. Their days were long, their duties demanding. Yet this journey held the key to eventual independence and potential recognition. The progression from apprentice to journeyman offered the promise of greater freedom, the opportunity to travel and refine their skills, saving money in the hope of one day joining a guild and establishing their own workshop. As the seasons turned, life teetered between periods of plenty and the threat of famine. Abundant harvests fueled communal celebrations, the air thick with joy and shared feasting, fostering a vibrant sense of community well-being. Yet when crops failed or war disrupted the land, famine struck at the heart of life, with hunger breaching defenses and serving as a stark reminder of life's inherent fragility. Work often ceased when bellies were empty, and people turned to the land and their own resourcefulness until new growth emerged in the wake of hardship. In contrast, the nobility lived lives marked by a strange duality. Their labor was often intertwined with leisure and governed by the pursuits of courtly life. Hunting and falconry were seen as extensions of their noble duties, while banquets and tournaments created elaborate displays of alliance and chivalry. Each indulgence often concealed layers of responsibility, as their estates operated under their meticulous oversight. The landscapes they inhabited were shaped by both pleasure and political maneuvering. Thus, the echoes of medieval labor resonate softly through history, a legacy of hard-won wisdom and resilience carried into the present. From the endeavors of those times sprang the foundations of modern societal structures and technological advancements. The persistent spirit of enterprise from that era continues to define humanity's ongoing relationship with purpose and toil. As the sun dipped below the horizon, medieval villages became enveloped in a cloak of darkness, transforming familiar paths into mysterious routes. Without electric lighting, twilight painted the sky in eerie shades of purple and blue, casting elongated shadows over the uneven streets. People hurried indoors, seeking shelter by the hearth, where the comforting warmth danced across worn stone walls. The world outside became a tapestry of sounds, a distant wolf howling, the soft sigh of the wind, nocturnal creatures stirring to life. Night was a realm where reality seemed to blur with the fantastical, where stories of spirits were woven into the fabric of collective belief. The chilling night air made every snap of a branch, every hoot of an owl feel charged with possibility. Villages fell into a tense quiet, waiting for the return of dawn. Within this darkness, fire served as both a guardian and a companion. Hearths crackled warmly inside homes, sending flickering light through small windows, acting as beacons against the encroaching gloom. Families gathered close, sharing meals and telling stories, the flames illuminating their faces as they spun tales. Fire was precious, It defied the sensory deprivation that came with night. Its crackling sounds reminded everyone of human presence amidst the vast unknown. By the hearth, families found comfort in the warmth, sharing narratives of history and myth, allowing imagination to roam against the backdrop of shifting shadows. Yet fire, a cherished protector, also held the potential for devastation. One careless spark could spell ruin for thatched roofs and wooden walls, a danger that lingered even within its protective embrace. Campfires in the wilderness served as a talisman against predators, their light deterring both wolves and human threats. In castles, torches burned brightly, casting their glow over stone battlements, a shield against the deepening blackness beyond the fortress walls. The night watch played a crucial role, patrolling streets that now lay silent under the quiet of night. They carried lanterns, their steady footsteps a reassuring presence against the potential for lurking chaos. Men armed with whistles or horns stood ready to call for help should danger arise, maintaining order amidst the shadows. The unsettling whispers of the night were kept at bay by these sentinels whose vigilance drew a line between safety and the unseen threats prowling just beyond the edge of the light. Their eyes knew every hidden alley and secret meeting place, an intricate understanding of the town's layout that defined their nocturnal duties. However, beyond the reach of firelight and human guardians lurked dangers of a more primal nature. Forests surrounding village lights teemed with wolves, their howls piercing the silence and sending shivers through those who heard them. They remained on the fringes, symbols of nature's untamed power, threats that were as real as they were legendary. Wolves were creatures of lore, embodying both fear and respect. Their presence served as a reminder of humanity's fragile hold against the wild. Villages erected barricades to protect against these four-legged marauders, while tales of wolfmen blurred the line between myth and beast, adding a supernatural layer of fear to already potent threats. In the fertile darkness, rumors of the supernatural took root and thrived. The night air seemed to carry the whispers of spirits, existing just at the edge of perception. Superstitions held considerable sway. Every shadow was a potential specter, each whisper a message from beyond. Communities engaged in various rituals, from hanging iron above doorways to muttering incantations, to ward off these unseen forces. Legends told of benevolent spirits who assisted those who respected ancient customs and punished those who strayed. Darkness also served as a cloak for human wrongdoing. Thieves flourished under the anonymity of night, exploiting the shadows for illicit gain. Driven by desperation or greed, they slipped through unsecured windows and down unguarded alleys, creating a sense of unease as palpable as any other threat. These rogues knew the landscape intimately, turning familiar places into havens for their activities. Street patrols could only deter so much. Vulnerabilities existed, waiting for cunning minds to exploit. Nighttime threats often reflected underlying village tensions, highlighting disparities and fueling fears of both tangible and abstract theft. Yet the same darkness that sheltered wrongdoers also inspired communities to unite, organizing guards to reclaim safety and restore trust. Under the cover of night, secrets could flourish. Clandestine meetings and hushed plans found sanctuary where daylight could not reach. Whether plotting political conspiracies or engaging in forbidden romances, the night provided cover for private endeavors framed by secrecy. In shadow-draped groves and secluded alleyways, the thrill of concealment was intoxicating, yet fraught with vulnerability. These gatherings wove a tapestry of intrigue, painting the night with threads of mistrust and alliance. Amidst the fear and mystery, many sought comfort in prayer. For medieval society, the divine offered solace against the insecurities that night brought. Candlelit chapels resonated with chants. Congregations gathered in shared faith, invoking celestial protection against dangers both spiritual and earthly. Inside homes, prayers whispered against the backdrop of a crackling fire offered both submission and hope, weaving belief into the very fabric of survival. While life by day adhered to earthly rules, at night the spiritual realm often felt more dominant, drawing strength from above until daylight offered reprieve. Throughout this dark tapestry of mystery and fear, one truth remained constant: dawn would come. The light of each morning fractured the night's hold, sweeping aside shadows to reveal a landscape of renewal and hope. The cyclical dance of light and dark became an anchor for those who endured the medieval night, It brought life full circle, a reminder of everything that had been weathered and survived as constellations faded before the morning's golden hue. With every dawn, the world reawakened, and each morning was a triumphant testament to survival, a celebration of life renewed after the darkness of the night before. In the Middle Ages, death cast a shadow over every life, lurking so persistently that it seemed as fundamental as the air itself. From the moment of birth, mortality was an intimate companion, not a distant possibility. Life was fragile, threatened from all sides by disease, starvation, the perils of childbirth, and the merciless violence of warfare. A short existence was far more common than a long one, fostering an acceptance of death that feels quite foreign to us today. To live in this era meant sharing one's days with death, acknowledging its certainty not with paralyzing fear, but with a routine acceptance of its influence on daily existence. This ever-present threat shaped a culture rich in death rituals and beliefs. Funeral practices were not viewed simply as burdens, but as essential ceremonies imbued with deep meaning and steeped in tradition. Bodies often required swift burial to prevent the spread of disease, making these farewells necessarily brief yet sincere. Despite the haste, each ceremony was full of symbolism, acting as a channel for communal grieving and spiritual reassurance, aimed at ensuring the soul's safe passage while comforting the living. Mourning became a vital, shared ritual, a reminder of each individual's fleeting journey and an assurance that death served merely as a gateway to eternal realms. Among these customs, the specter of the Black Death looms largest, dwarfing prior brushes with death in its catastrophic scope. The plague of the 14th century decimated populations with ferocious speed, leaving behind deserted villages and eerily quiet city streets. Beyond the immediate physical toll, it tore at the very core of medieval society, forcing a new reckoning with death's sheer power and unpredictability. It fundamentally altered how people viewed life and death, imbuing existing fears with layers of religious hope for salvation. Amidst this apocalyptic reality, art and literature bore witness to the horrors, filled with stark reminders of human fragility and urging reflection on the ephemeral nature of life. The chilling image of the danse macabre, or dance of death, depicted by medieval artists, graphically illustrated this haunting relationship with mortality. These portrayals showed a skeletal death leading an unavoidable procession of all humankind, from kings to peasants, emphasizing life's impermanence and the ultimate leveling power of death's touch. Such art adorned church walls, blending visual storytelling with moral instruction, cautioning viewers about their own transience and encouraging a pious life as they prepared for judgment in the afterlife. Yet art was just one way in which the prevailing cultural attitudes gave form to the concept of death. Superstitions flourished, assigning meaning to every subtle sound and rustle. A dog's howl, an owl's screech, or even a comet streaking across the night sky became omens, tightly weaving together the world of earthly daily life and the mystical unknown beyond. These beliefs, though often rooted in fear, provided a framework for understanding the tragedies that seemed to lie waiting around every corner. Tales of ghostly apparitions and wandering spirits created narratives that influenced burial practices, all with the aim of ensuring that the dead remained peacefully at rest. Death's intimate connection with life extended across social classes, impacting peasants and nobles in markedly different ways. For the peasant man, death was a familiar neighbor, made more frequent by relentless labor and scarce resources. Honored with prompt burials necessitated by circumstances, his funeral rites blended spiritual customs with local traditions, transforming grief into communal resilience. Conversely, the demise of a nobleman inspired displays of pomp and circumstance, emphasizing status, highlighting family heritage, and immortalizing legacy through grand tombs and elaborate memorials. Such contrasts reveal a society where social standing influenced even the experience of dying, mirroring the stratified order of daily life. Amidst these realities, religion was seamlessly interwoven with mortality, offering both assurance and discipline. The church wielded immense influence over perceptions of the afterlife, shaping beliefs about heaven, purgatory, and hell as stages awaiting the soul's journey. Death was not merely an ending, it was seen as an urgent transition, pregnant with spiritual consequences dictated by one's behavior in this life. Through religious rituals, masses, and clerical intercession, these beliefs imbued life with a sense of otherworldly justice, encouraging lives lived devoutly, lest one suffer eternally in the realms beyond. Epidemics introduced further challenges, demanding pragmatic solutions like plague pits and mass graves to contain the overwhelming death toll. Such unmarked burials stripped death of much ceremony in the face of dire necessity. Despite their anonymity, these pits retained a certain solemn dignity, often marked by communal prayers and blessings. They remain grim testaments to the era's devastating mortality and the resilient spirit of those who endured. Battlefields, too, where corpses often lay exposed under a war-torn sky, provided brutal reminders of conflict's heavy price. The dead were typically buried in nearby mass graves, receiving hasty rites that reflected the chaos, but also a final note of respect amidst the struggle for survival. In this complex tapestry, woven from the threads of life and death, commemoration played a significant role. Monuments and effigies emerged as enduring symbols connecting the past and the present. Whether created with great wealth or humble simplicity, these memorials served a dual purpose: preserving remembrance and asserting spiritual continuity. Steeped in memory, even simple grave markers inscribed lives into history. These expressions of remembrance, whether through monumental or modest means, emphasize the medieval man's focus on honoring lives through both spiritual and earthly dimensions. Ultimately, death presented itself not as a final conclusion, but as a passage to continued existence. This belief, deeply ingrained in the medieval psyche, permeated every aspect of life. It offered a framework for existence where moral virtue carried eternal significance and dying was seen as a seamless transition into a spiritual journey. Accepting death with a mixture of fatalism and faith, medieval society faced life's uncertainties with remarkable resilience, looking beyond the veil and finding comfort in the promised light of eventual salvation.